Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 5th of November 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningson from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
And we're going to get straight on with Brexit because the mainstream media, Patrick, full of this story. This is the Irish News. They're saying speculation mounts on Theresa May's secret deal on Brexit that avoids need for hard border. Now, the hard border they're talking about, of course, is the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and as most people will know by now, this is a real area of contention with regard to Brexit, and the reason is the customs union and the single market. And so the question is, if Britain leaves the customs union and the single market, what would happen with the Irish border? And there's talk about perhaps there being some kind of separate agreement between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland to maintain an open border there, but then that has the potential of creating a border in the Irish Sea between the British mainland and the island of Ireland. And of course, Theresa May, because of the situation that she is in with no majority, relies on the votes of the Democratic Unionist Party, Northern Irish Party, in order to maintain her majority in the House of Commons. And in fact to maintain her standing as Prime Minister. So she's stuck between a rock and a hard place, and as this headline suggests, a secret deal done on Brexit. What they're saying is that the EU has made private, no, I just should say before we go on with this, that this story originated with the Sunday Times. It's been replicated at just about every mainstream media outlet going, and they're talking about private concessions from the EU. They're claiming that there's an all-UK customs deal, which is going to be written into the legally binding withdrawal agreement. The preparations for a final Brexit deal are far more advanced than previously disclosed. Well, Patrick, I'm going to argue that that the Brexit deal was done before we ever had the referendum in 2016. This is pretty much what I have been arguing, because I've been highlighting this document, the best of both worlds. And the opening salvo from David Cameron, he drafted this document, or at least he was Prime Minister at the time. He said, "We've secured a new settlement to give the United Kingdom special status in the European Union. As this white paper sets out, we will be permanently out of ever closer union, ensuring we can never be part of a European superstate." Now, at that time, if you remember, Patrick, he was talking about the UK being able to withdraw from certain EU institutions and certain EU obligations. He was also talking about a new relationship with a reformed European Union, a new relationship. This is exactly what Theresa May's been talking about, a relationship of greater depth and breadth than we've ever seen before. And so I'm arguing, and I have been since 2016, that this document is going to look extremely similar, or sorry, the final deal that Theresa May presents is going to look very similar to this document. Well, David Davis then was also writing in the Sunday Times over the weekend, and he had this to say: "We need cards laid on the table so we can form a judgment. Is the future of the Union at stake?" That's the UK. "Are we being hurtled towards a Hotel California Brexit where we can check out but never leave?" And of course, the point that the UK column has been trying to make is that EU military unification means that, of course, that's exactly what the situation is. We can check out, but we can never leave, because our military is unified and integrated fully into the new EU military structures. Now, it was interesting that he chose the term cards laid on the table, because if anybody wants a little bit of background on this, have a look at this article on the UK column website. Theresa May's cards are on the table, because CARD is one of the many acronyms that's being pushed forward as part of this new EU military structure, which is being built and has been built to a large degree. Now, of course, David Davis, part of the new Leave Means Leave campaign, alongside Nigel Farage. Unfortunately, Nigel Farage, Patrick, doesn't have too much to say about EU military unification. He doesn't want to talk about that at all. However, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, Leave Means Leave held an event in Bolton. And at that event, there was an interjection from the floor about EU military unification, and people on the panel were asked to comment on that. And in fact, Nigel Farage did comment off the record quietly to David Davis, and he said, you know, basically the British military will be taken over by the EU after next year. What he actually said was they will after next year, to a comment that was coming from the floor of the meeting. So we're saying hashtag Farage knows. He does know. He understands this absolutely. He isn't speaking about it in any great detail. And we will have more on this on Wednesday's UK Column News when David Ellis and Alex Thompson will be on the programme. Now, at the weekend, we held the emergency briefing on defence and security in Totnes. Patrick, very well attended event. Thank you very much to everybody that attended that. We were really pleased with the turnout, bearing in mind how quickly this was organised. And some interesting presentations given at that, which we will have up online, hopefully in the next few days. But one of the things that David Ellis was pointing out was, of course, that EU military unification, Patrick, isn't just about creating a unified EU military structure. The point is, if you listen to what the EU has been saying over the months and years, and if you remember back in 2015, you were on this programme, I believe, when we were talking about the European Defence Agency meeting that Federica Mogherini and Jens Stoltenberg were at, where they were discussing the sort of merging of military and civilian functions, and particularly with regard to policing. And David's point is, if you have an EU military, which isn't a national military, it belongs to some larger organisation, and you have, for example, something like Operation Temporer, where the police and the military are providing policing structures, policing services rather, on UK streets. What happens if you put a foreign national in that role? Are they going to be, how are they going to treat UK nationals under those circumstances? This is the question. And why am I raising this? Because, well, the British government has announced today that they're going to start recruiting from Commonwealth countries into the British military. There'll be no requirement for the Commonwealth national to have lived in this country. They will simply be able to apply for a post in the British military. Why are they doing this? Because they handed recruitment process over to Capita, and Capita has failed miserably to fulfil the requirements, the pretty shockingly low requirements for recruitment within the British military, and now we're looking to foreign nationals to fill the British military. I find this quite concerning, bearing in mind the overall strategy of military unification and the sort of policing, civilian policing function that these people are talking about so much.
Like a gendarmerie type setup. This is
exactly.
It's not unusual on the continent, by the way. Of course, anybody who's traveled to Europe will know this isn't anything unusual if you're in Italy or walking through the streets of Venice or Paris, for that matter. But certainly, this would be a new development for the United Kingdom. But this can also go the other way, Mike. This can, if that arrangement came to pass, it would British servicemen or troops or police or whatever you want to call it, the new gendarmerie, they would be deployed possibly to the continent for operations or large events, civil unrest or something like this. So
it's a civil unrest aspect that is of particular concern. I think, bearing in mind the various extremes that are being built up at the moment in Europe and in the United States, in fact. Right, just before we move on, let me just mention a couple of events taking place. First of all, spotlight on HPV vaccines taking place in the Tabernacle in Notting Hill on Sunday the 11th of November. That's this coming Sunday. This is being organised by Christina England and a number of speakers there, including Dr. Graham Downing at that event. Please do get along to that if you possibly can. And can I just say that I understand that today Facebook has removed this event from Christina England's Facebook channel, so there's no possibility of sharing the event as she had originally posted it to Facebook. So I would ask everybody, whether you're going to this or not, please share the event and let people know that it's taking place, because we've got to step up to the plate, I think, once the social media platforms start trying to shut us down, Patrick.
So that's Sunday, November 11th, 9:30 a.m. at the Tabernacle in Notting Hill.
Gate.
a very nice venue, by the way.
Yes.
So if you are planning to go to that event, it's a fantastic venue. So worth take a screenshot of that if you're watching the video on YouTube and share that on Facebook.
Please, yes, and also mention AV 9.1 Democracy in Chains taking place on Sunday, the 2nd of December 2018, at the Crown Plaza Hotel in London. And tickets available from alternativeview.co.uk, and you will be speaking at that along with Dr. Graham Downing, Brian Gerrish, Alex Thompson and Ian R. Crane. Another worthwhile event to go to.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Okay, Patrick, let's move on to sanctions and Iran. And well, what's the latest on this? Trump has renewed sanctions on Iran.
Yes, so all of the full force of sanctions has come into place on Monday. Well, that's today and over the weekend. So what does that mean? That means that all the agreements that were repealed during the Iran nuclear deal phase, which came into being in 2015 under the Obama administration, that's all. The clock has been turned back, basically. So all manner of sanctions placed on Iran. It's has a lot of the elements of a full embargo. Of course, it's a lot softer than previously thought. The U.S. has kind of backpedaled a little bit. They have issued waivers to 8 different countries in terms of buying Iranian oil. You might have seen, or people might have seen, statements by the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo about reducing, John Bolton as well, reducing Iranian oil exports to zero. You can imagine the economic effect that would have on the country. So it's not made public what 8 countries have waivers for this, but we believe that 4 of those would be China, India, Japan, and South Korea. China and Japan's fuel and energy needs are massive, and so they are the main recipients of Middle East oil more than any other, probably that in Europe, but more than any other place in the world. So South Korea as well. So, and there's 4 other countries that we don't know who they are.
Is Israel likely to be one of those?
That would be interesting if they were. I wouldn't doubt it, actually. Anyway, so that's what's going on. 700 people have been named in this OFAC, U.S. Treasury Department list of sanctioned individuals. So they claim they're sanctioned the regime who's robbing the people of Iran and taking the money to spread death and destruction worldwide. As if that's like the pot calling the kettle black, that the U.S. would be making such a statement against Iran. But that's the new normal now in terms of rhetoric. So.
Okay, so that's a great graphic there to lead into this, by the way. But let's see what they're going to shut down the SWIFT banking system for Iran as well. Is that the plan?
Yes. Here is the eminence gris behind Donald Trump. This is Steve Mnuchin. If this doesn't look like a shady character, I don't know what does. This is unfortunately the U.S. Treasury Secretary, and so definitely he's having a go at SWIFT. I mean, this is the International Payment Clearance Communication System, and Mnuchin saying we have advised SWIFT that it must disconnect any Iranian financial institutions that we designate as soon as technologically feasible to avoid sanctions exposure. He's talking about sanctioning SWIFT. This is international, not-for-profit, non-governmental organization, very important in terms of facilitating transactions and clearing payments worldwide.
They've tried to pull this gag with Russia and China as well, haven't they?
Yeah, they have as well. And SWIFT has resisted this time and time again. The problem is it's a very dangerous precedent, because if SWIFT gives in on the case of Iran, they could potentially give in on anybody. The United States is going to lean on them. So it's very dangerous if that's the case. SWIFT is based in Europe. It's Belgium or Luxembourg. I'm not sure which country. So that's what's happening. And yeah, so that's kind of a major precedent if that's allowed to go forward. A lot of people hope that it won't go forward.
Well, Iran themselves are taking a pretty strong stance against this, and we'll talk about that in a second, but this is what Rouhani had to say. We'll continue to sell our oil and we'll proudly break the sanctions. We were discussing this last night, Patrick, and the point you made is that really Iran, why would Iran comply with these sanctions? they really have got nothing to lose by breaking them if they possibly can.
Of course they don't, and this isn't like rocket science or anything that no one's figured out before. This is well established game theory. If you look at the 120 odd cases of sanctions in the last 100 years, you'll see that there are clear patterns in terms of what people will comply with and what they won't. And most of this, Mike, has to do with what type of threats are made to a country and the expectation of conflict in the future. And the biggest mistake the United States has made with regards to its punitive sanctions, especially on Iran, is the threatening of military force by sort of war hawks, because that's going to mean that it's almost a guarantee that the target nation is not going to want to give any concessions or comply. And this is well established this is grounded in academic theory and scholarly work in terms of sanctions theory. So, but unfortunately, it seems like nobody in the Trump administration has actually read any of that or has any advisors that have any clue about any of what's gone on in the last 100 years with regards to sanctions. Or maybe they do, Mike, and maybe this is just all bluster. This is all Punch and Judy. Maybe Trump is doing the art of the deal writ large, setting the scene, setting the theater up for some sort of grand deal. So he's pushing hard, and he's planning to pull back in exchange for some massive deal. I would think, Mike, that with regards to Iran, that the great Jared Kushner peace deal that we've heard so much about, that's been so hyped, but we haven't actually seen anything. So I would think that whatever position the United States is pushing hard on Iran, they might be trying to wrap this into some sort of Israel-Palestine deal in order to sort of get concessions there or help that deal go through. So I don't think it's going to work, Mike. And I think there's also signs that these sanctions aren't actually going to have the effect that the United States would like them to have. The markets haven't reacted to, oil prices haven't shot up. So I don't think it's going to be as effective overall. It's hugely unfortunate. It's very dangerous what the United States is doing by waging economic warfare in this way and doing it so brazenly, saying we want to cause enough pain. And on one hand, they're saying we want to bankrupt Iran and put pressure on the economy so that people will rise up and overthrow the regime. And then you have Mike Pompeo backpedaling yesterday or saying, no, we don't want to hurt the Iranian people. We only want to punish the regime. Well, you don't just punish the regime when you sort of institute an embargo of like this. So it's, again, they either don't know what they're talking about or they're doing it brazenly in the expectation that they will be able to gain leverage for some other bigger deal down the road.
Well, the Russian government has issued a statement on this, a pretty strongly worded statement on this. The course pursued by Washington to demolish international legal instruments of nuclear non-proliferation and arms control is cause for deep disappointment and increasing concern. The United States has now dealt another powerful blow to the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, bringing it closer to collapse while hypocritically talking about the need to strengthen it. And they went on to say, if Washington, as it claims, is indeed interested in negotiations with Tehran, the policy of sanctions pressure aimed at diminishing Iran's economic and defense potential, as well as undermining the internal political situation there, must be revised immediately. So they're pretty clear about this. And I think they seem to be, from what I'm reading there, Patrick, they seem to be linking this to Trump's recent announcements on the INF Treaty, and they're pretty cross about that as well. So they seem to be linking these two things here in this statement.
Yeah. So again, this is a good example of Russia is exhibiting normative behavior internationally, and the United States is not exhibiting behavior that adheres to international norms. So Russia is normative, the United States is not. So who's the regime and who's the government in this, if we're going to borrow the Western language? So definitely the United States is waging war on the international order, any potential of a multilateral order, and the United Nations is also I'll throw the United Nations in here as well. This is a direct affront to international law, principles of international cooperation, the liberal world order, as some conservatives would like to call it, and demonize it as well. But the reality is, if you don't, you might not like what some people call the liberal world order. Other people just call it a world order. Other people call it an order. Other people call it the international system or the international functioning community. Whatever you want to call it, it is one of the only things I think that's maybe keeping a Hobbesian world order, a state of nature internationally from setting in. So if you don't like war, you don't like world wars, you might want to give it a chance, international cooperation, that is. But it seems like the United States is really making a play. This is if you look at history, Mike, if you look at empires in decline, they do exactly what the United States is doing right now. They wage economic warfare, and they threaten their allies as well as their enemies. This is a well-established history. This is exactly what the U.S. is doing right now. So is this an empire in decline? Is that what we're looking at with the United States?
Well, what's China's response been to this? This is Reuters saying China says its lawful trade with Iran should be respected. So are we getting an indication that China is not going to cave into this?
Absolutely. So China is exhibiting normative behavior. China is adhering, like Russia, to international norms in a rules-based international order.
So how ironic.
So China is saying it's lawful trade. We have a right to trade with the partners that we want to trade with, have relationships with. And who can argue with that? What is the case against Iran? The United States has not made a strong case against Iran. And if they keep on this line, Mike, the P5+1, which is no longer the P5+1, it's the P4+1, I guess, it's going to turn into the P4+20. Okay, so a lot of countries, when I spoke about this on the Sunday Wire last night, what the U.S. is doing is pushing countries into alliance, anti-American alliances, actually. The danger, however, of this is we will drift into an environment of power politics where when tension raises and you have lots of different alliances like this, the potential for a spark setting off a powder keg or a world war. Just look back at history. What the U.S. is doing now by trying to corner countries economically is exactly what it did to Japan before the attack of Pearl Harbor, and that's historical fact.
Now, last week, Patrick, China, President Xi suggested that perhaps China would be making more arrangements towards preparing for war.
Well, yeah.
And it started to look a little bit. His rhetoric was getting somewhat more serious than we've heard in the past.
It's as serious as we've heard in a long time, Mike. So he's President Xi Jinping. We need to take all complex situations into consideration and make emergency plans accordingly. Concentrate preparations for fighting war. Okay, so China's serious. They're a serious player. They have capabilities. They're not on the level of the United States militarily, but when you hear statements like this coming from the Chinese president, Mike, it's something to pay attention to. This is a shift in rhetoric, absolutely.
And what's the U.S. saying then?
Well, here's our evangelical U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. Using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale, says Mike Pence. So there's our vice president. And those of you who think Trump is scary and dangerous, I'm saying that Mike Pence is potentially more scary and dangerous than Donald Trump. That's someone you would really want to be worried about, actually, if he ever assumed the chief executive position. But so moving on from Mr. Pence, so China is actively engaged in full comprehensive military drills right now. You can see some of the footage here. China's capabilities, naval, air, reconnaissance, ground to air missiles. It's significant, Mike.
Yeah.
They have a lot in terms of capabilities, and on technological levels, hypersonic technologies as well, defense technologies. It's significant, Mike, and I think this
And they have aircraft carriers that actually have aircraft on them.
they do. Unlike some other countries in NATO member countries, they actually have their own aircraft to put on the aircraft carriers. Correct.
But what is the main concern here? It seems it's Taiwan.
Well, it is. This is what it's about. It's about Taiwan, and the United States has been backing Taiwan for a very long time, and keeping the tensions high in the region. Of course, that justifies the U.S. presence in the region. But people have to realize Taiwan's a highly militarized country. It's an island off the coast of China there, just bordering the South China Sea. And as you can see from this graphic statistics, Mike, China has got a significant defense capability for a country of 23 million. You can see it's comparable in terms of what it has in terms of hardware, Mike. So, and some of these numbers are slightly out of date, but it just gives you an idea of proportion.
But the U.S. also active in the area?
The U.S. is also active, running major drills. This is Valiant Shield 18. This is, and also they're doing United States what they call freedom of navigation exercises in the South China Sea. So clearly they're baiting China right in their own backyard here.
It does amuse me that we're seeing pictures of F-35s. I don't think those are, China should be too concerned about those, perhaps.
No, and I doubt those are flying in around the South China Sea either. They're probably, it's Vandenberg Air Force Base in California or outside Las Vegas or something, I'm not sure. But so the U.S. is flexing their muscles right in China's front yard, basically.
Okay. So one China, what's this all about?
Well, this is what it's all about. So, the United States is constantly going back and forth or sort of playing doublespeak with regards to its policy of China. So the one China policy is what, that there's one China, Taiwan is not a separate country, that it will eventually be integrated back into China. And so there are people in the U.S., of course, that are playing two ways on this issue. So the separation in 1949, the South China Sea then is contested in terms of territorial and naval access. Then we talked about Valiant Shield, this major U.S. drill here, and the freedom of navigation exercises. But the big thing is the United States has been selling large amounts of U.S. weaponry to Taiwan, of course. So when you look at this picture, that Taiwan is a major client for the United States in terms of weapons, it's no surprise, Mike, that we saw that announcement from President Xi earlier. So this isn't coming out of nowhere. I think China is reading the signs and does feel that the United States is pushing a little bit harder than they ever have in the past. And China has now put their foot forward and said, we're going to do something about it. I don't think people in China or Taiwan, Mike, want to go to war. But if it comes to that, there's no question who would be victorious in that sort of conflict, Mike.
Okay, well, before we come on to what Donald Trump's doing about this, you wanted to highlight this article you've posted in 21st Century Wire. Impact is imminent, getting into gold, getting out of the euro and dollar. Well,
if you looked at the news this week, if you checked any of the financial pages, you'll see Russia and China have purchased records amounts of physical gold, not paper gold, real gold. So they're clearly, both Russia and China are hedging against some sort of potential future dollar event, basically, or some sort of deflationary or devaluation of the dollar cycle. So they're hedging with lots of gold, Mike. So clearly China and Russia know something, and Europe as well. European countries are also getting into the act on this as well in terms of repatriating their gold, Mike. What does that mean for the euro? It's not good news, Mike, for the euro. The euro hasn't inspired confidence for a lot of financial experts over the years for many reasons. And one of the things that is really backing the euro in terms of confidence is the faith in the European project. And right now, with Brexit and with the things we're hearing from Italy, Mike,
yes,
and some of these other countries, so that confidence in the European project, that is, if you want to talk about the fundamental, confidence behind the euro as a single currency, that's one of the main pillars. And so that's shaky right now. So in terms of futures on the euro, yeah, there's people saying, well, it's a good time to flee, to get out of out of the euro. But of course, we know with currency speculations, the sharks can make money on the way down as well as on the way up. So this is just for the average investor.
So, you know, with this situation, China taking a slightly different direction perhaps here in one respect, and we have all this rhetoric coming out from Mike Pompeo and others within the Trump administration, but not necessarily from Trump himself. I mean, he's been quite bullish about the trade situation with China, but he isn't making any direct threats militarily, whereas some of the others have been quite strong in their words. But so it's quite interesting then that, well, to many people's surprise, over the last few days, there have been announcements of meetings between Trump and Xi, and also between Trump and Putin as well. So he's going to meet both of them. Well, he's meeting Putin first on Sunday at the commemorations for the end of the First World War. So he's going to be doing that, but also at the G20 in Buenos Aires in Argentina, which is November the 30th to the 1st of December. So that's going on, and South China Morning Post then announced over the weekend that they're going to have dinner together after the meeting. So Trump had initially said he was going to leave the G20 and go straight back home again. In fact, he's decided to stay a bit longer. And what the South China Morning Post was saying was that a Western-style sit-down dinner after the G20 summit could offer the two leaders more time to talk than a chat on the sidelines of the summit, and could offer a more conducive atmosphere for negotiations. Trump originally planned to leave Buenos Aires as soon as the G20 agenda finished, but he's decided to postpone his departure, to make this dinner happen. So that must be a positive to take out of this whole thing.
I think so. But the other thing you need to look at is with regards to Trump in the United States, Putin in Russia, and Xi in China. When you're talking about the announcements China's making with regards to stepping up their military preparation, the statements that Donald Trump is making along the same lines, really sort of hawkish confidence, saber rattling, and also President Putin in Russia is also laying strong words on the table with regards to Russian defense. So, but for all three of these, Mike, it's important that they're also making a big case to their domestic audiences as well. And so, and this is the environment, this is the international environment that we live in. So although this is having some amplification internationally, you can't underestimate also that, there is a massive component of this that has to do with their domestic audience as well.
Well, that's all correct, but I just want to highlight some of the things that Putin has been saying recently, because I just find this quite interesting. He was speaking at the 22nd World Russian People's Council a couple of days ago. This is organized by the Russian Orthodox Church, has been for the last 25 years. And he was talking about the need for mankind to organize so that each unique civilization supplements and enriches others. And he said that Russia, India, China, Western Europe, United States, many others need to be getting on board with this idea. And he said it's now being decided how the world will look in the future in the coming decades. Will this be a world of monologue and the rule of force, or a world of dialogue and mutual respect? And in many ways, this language that he's using here reflects the type of language that Xi Jinping has been using quite a lot over the last couple of years. And he went on to say, by the history of our country as an authentic civilization, and a unique one, but one which does not assertively and aggressively claim its exceptionalism. Well, is that a direct dig at the United States at the moment?
Yeah, this is a direct dig at the United States. You could even say this is a direct dig at Israel as well. So, when he's talking about exceptionalism, not to be confused with patriotism. So Russian patriotism or national pride, and what some Americans might call nationalist, and the alarm bells goes off. That's very different than exceptionalism, and the American exceptionalism, which is very similar to Israeli exceptionalism, having to do with some of it has to do with it being a settler culture, a colonial mentality. But it also has to do, I think, in modern times with the United States, Mike, and also with NATO member states as well in Western Europe. It's vindicationism. It's more than exceptionalism. It's that we are an advanced country. We have the best political system in history. We have the great U.S. democracy, which is really supposed to be a constitutional republic, but that's been sort of, thrown away in exchange for this democracy. Britain is the same. And so by going overseas and by forcing regime change and by telling governments they need to go and replacing them like Victoria Nuland and her gang did in the Ukraine, that's vindicationism. It's the vindication of Western democracy in their eyes. So that's the real foundation of what you might call American exceptionalism or Western European exceptionalism. So it is really almost on a level of religion. So it's missionary work, basically, is that we've got it so right that we're going to export this freedom and democracy to the world because we want everybody to enjoy the freedoms that we have. So this is the idealism, and this fits very well. It dovetails very nicely into liberal interventionism. So, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George Bush, the neoconservatives, they're all vindicationists. They're all American exceptionalists or democratic exceptionalists. There's no difference. Tony Blair is the same. There's no difference. You can peel the labels away. The end game is exactly the same.
Well, what happens to American exceptionalism in the event of a certain outcome in the U.S. midterms?
Yes. So we're told this is the most important election of our lifetimes in America. And here's MSNBC. The Republicans are outpacing the Democrats in early voting in key states, NBC News finds. And NBC News is very much a Democratic-oriented news outlet. So
the main voting happens tomorrow, does it?
Yes, yeah. So many people have already voted. So there's already maybe some polling that might indicate voting that's already come in, but data suggests enthusiasm among early GOP voters that could put a dent in Democratic hopes for a, quote, blue wave in the midterms. And so the question is, what will happen? What if the Democrats don't win the House and Senate? What are they going to do, Mike? Will there be rioting on the streets? Will there be a mass Harry-Carry? We don't know, but Ben & Jerry's has come up with a solution. They're launching the new Resist ice cream brand this last week. So if the Democrats lose, I suppose they could go down to the store, get a few tubs of this, and tuck into a Netflix series at home and resist from your couch while you're enjoying Ben & Jerry's, Mike.
Excellent.
That's the U.S. political scene in a nutshell.
Excellent. And we're just going to end off then with Julian Assange. This is day 2329.
Yes, I might be a day off, but I calculated that's 2,329th day in the Ecuadorian embassy. Arbitrary detention, according to a UN report. Things are getting very serious, in fact, with Julian Assange. We just saw this report last night, Mike. Intruder tried to break into the Ecuadorian embassy, potentially to kidnap Assange. This is not a sensational report.
This is the Daily Mail, this headline?
This is from the Daily Mail, but you can also find this elsewhere as well. Consortium News is actually, I think, one of the first people to publish this story. But he was woken up in the middle of the night, and he had sort of set a fire extinguisher by his window as a kind of booby trap in order to alert him if someone was trying to get in. And this is what happened. So apparently this was averted. So what's going on? A scaffolding has been erected around the building, Mike. So again, not a safe place, really, even for Assange. So all indications, Mike, seem that this story is coming to a head. And reports are that his health is very bad. And one of his great friends and people, the person really supporting him, who everybody knows, is Pamela Anderson, the actress. She's Canadian, and she's petitioning the Australian government to negotiate safe passage so that Assange can go home to Australia. Considering, Mike, it's been almost 8 years or 7 years, I don't think that's an unreasonable request. So, but his mother issued a really quite emotional message online last night, and the campaign is Unity for J, hashtag Unity for J.
Well, we have a short clip of that, so let's just have a look at that first.
This is not a drill. This is an emergency. The life of my son, journalist Julian Assange, is in immediate and critical danger. I thank you all for being here and listening to a mother's plea to ask your help to save him. Despite Julian being a multi-award winning journalist, much loved and respected for courageously exposing serious, high-level crimes and corruption in the public interest, he is right now alone, sick, in pain, silenced in solitary confinement, cut off from all contact, and being tortured in the heart of London. The modern-day cage for political prisoners is no longer the Tower of London. It is the Ecuadorian embassy.
So his mother saying that she believes his life is at risk, and if the Daily Mail and others are correct, that seems to be the case. How is this going to end?
I don't know, but the statement she made at the end there, she said, you know, the Tower of London used to be the symbol of detention for prisoners in the capital, and now it's the Ecuadorian embassy. I think you can't say it any better than that. And that's a mother speaking there. She's been campaigning like 24/7 for her son for a very long time now, and they've really stepped it up in the last 6 months. Ever since Assange's Twitter internet privileges were taken away at the embassy, that's when the campaign really stepped up in April. So hashtag Unity for Jay. They have a lot of great videos and content, and you know, the fact that Julian Assange is off Twitter, Mike. You remember what he was tweeting, you know, right after Skripal. What an impact Assange was having on social media in terms of shaping the conversation. Yeah. He's a very sharp political mind. He's no longer in that conversation right now. So, you know, I think it goes without saying that he's definitely an important voice. WikiLeaks is definitely an important organization over the last 10 years. Yeah. So I think, you know, great to have some of these people back in the scene. Certainly, if you believe in accountability, transparency, freedom, and democracy, certainly WikiLeaks and Julian Assange have made some contributions in that department over the years. So that's worth looking at. Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me, Patrick. Thank you for joining us. We will be back at the same time, 1 p.m. on Wednesday. And as I say, we will have David Ellis and Alex Thompson with us to discuss the emergency briefing that took place over the weekend and the implications around EU military unification, amongst other subjects. But that's an important UK column news, so please join us for that. We will see you then. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.